Bienvenidos. Welcome. You are tuned in to El Chalán Radio Spot. Kicking off an exclusive spot on El Chalán. El Chalán is dedicated, seeks out, and invites the movers and shakers of our community. The ones who have set out to mobilize, to make a difference. The ones that have a story. The ones that inspire, and the ones that bring positive change. Welcome to an El Chalán Exclusive. Hey, welcome to El Chalán Radio Spot. Thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Richie, your host. Tonight I present an awesome, amazing exclusive. I have guest Anna LeBaron joining me tonight for an awesome chat about her new book, The Polygamist Daughter. I have a quick intro and then check it out. El Chalán is gearing up to hold an exclusive conversation with the author of the memoir, The Polygamist Daughter, Anna LeBaron.
I'm the author of The Polygamist Daughter, and in that book I share my story of being born into, raised in, and eventually escaping from a violent polygamist cult.
Another mover and shaker comes to El Chalán Radio Spot to present her incredible journey.
My father was the leader of the group of people, the cult, that I was born into. And even though we were taught that we were celestial children, you would think that that would earn us some favorable treatment, but it didn't. He was not around, and so he wasn't there to kind of oversee how his children are being treated. You're raised in an environment that's filled with fear, chaos, insecurity. I look back now and see God's promise in the Bible that says, I will be the father to the fatherless, became true in my life. As I look back and I see the times where the trajectory of my life just took an entirely different turn. I see his hand orchestrating events and people, and knowing that that was his fatherly provision and protection for me, knowing that I am his daughter, and I have been all along.
A story of personal growth and finding your way through obstacles and challenges.
The themes of the book, abuse and neglect, fatherlessness, lack of provision, lack of protection, those are common. So you don't have to have been born into a polygamous family to draw from the themes of the book to enrich your own life. No matter where you find yourself, you're not alone. God is there, ready and willing to orchestrate things to bring you to the place of wholeness and healing and aliveness again. That redemption and that restoration is available to everyone.
Join us Friday, June 9th, as we present an exclusive with Anna LeBaron, The Polygamist Daughter. Welcome to this special edition of El Chalán Radio Spot. El Chalán Radio Spot invites and seeks the movers and shakers of our community. Tonight we host a very special conversation with author Anna LeBaron, daughter of deceased fugitive criminal violent polygamous cult leader Ervo LeBaron, to talk about her new memoir, The Polygamist Daughter. Anna is here to present her amazing story in a journey where she endured abandonment, sexual grooming, horrifying living conditions, child labor, and much instability of living places and caregivers. She escaped the polygamous cult at age 13 and became a Christian. She is a gifted communicator, a personal growth activist, residing now in Dallas, Texas, mother of 5 children. Welcome, Anna LeBaron. Anna, welcome to El Chalán radio spot. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you, Richie, for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure that you would come on and do this. Gosh, we have such an amazing journey to present tonight. Let me turn off a little bit of the extra audios I have. One moment here.
Okay.
Where is that app? Here we go. So, I want to just welcome everybody for listening tonight. We are presenting The Polygamist Daughter, a memoir written by Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson, and it's published on Blackstone Publishing. Anna, I guess the first thing we can jump into is in the beginning of your book. Tell us how old. Where do we find Anna in the opening of your book, and tell us the situation of what's going on.
Okay, before I answer that question, I just want to make a slight correction. Okay. Blackstone is the producer of the audio edition of the book, which is what you listen to.
Yes.
Tyndale House Publishers is the publisher of the book.
Okay,
so
that's what I thought.
Having done that, I will say that chapter 1 of my book starts at age 7 when I'm in Dallas, Texas. And this was the first time when my mom left us kids in order to go and do my father's bidding. And I was aware that she was going to be gone possibly a long period of time. And so that's where the book opens, in that event. That was the first of the events that shaped my life on into my adulthood, which is why that's where I chose to start the first chapter.
Very, very awesome. In the book, you go through a journey where your father ends up being a criminal, convicted polygamous cult leader, and eventually you end up escaping the cult, and this is practically your story. Such a gripping story, and of course, there's so many other publishings of this story in different forms, correct?
Correct. There's been a lot of books written about my father and the crimes that he was responsible for. Even a made-for-TV movie that was put out that's just horrific. But it's the truth. My father was responsible for atrocious crimes against humanity and people that I love and care about.
Okay. In the story, in the beginning of the book, you're left with a caregiver. What is her name?
Are you talking about in Dallas or in Mexico?
The Mexican lady.
Okay. In the book, I don't use her real name just to protect her privacy.
Okay.
In the book, I call her Antonia.
Yes, that's correct, Antonia. And can you tell us a little bit of the character of Antonia in your real life and in the book?
Well, this is what I know. She was, this couple that we were left with in Mexico, in Veracruz, they were pretty new converts to my father's, quote, church.
Okay.
And so they're a young couple with 2 young children, and then all of a sudden, these people arrive on their doorstep, and children are just deposited with them, and they're told to just take care of these other people's children. And so, I write from my perspective, and I tell the stories from my perspective about what happened. while I was living there. But I can, for just a brief moment, I can look from the other side and see from Antonia's perspective of what that life must have been like to be a young wife, and then to find out that eventually your husband is going to take another wife.
Yes.
And become a polygamist. And my brain has a hard time just wrapping itself around the type of emotions that she must have felt just imagining that scenario playing out, in the long term. And so those are the events that happened. She has her perspective and probably her stories to tell. But from my perspective, I was unwanted and a threat.
And you were.
I mean, eventually,
you were a burden.
I'm 9 years old, and I was a burden. Like, she had additional mouths to feed when she could barely afford to feed her own children. And so, I was 9 years old, and in our polygamist group, girls were married off as young as 14 years old. And so I was just a couple of years away from being considered marriageable age,
Yes, that's right.
And so I didn't know anything about that, not very much anyway, because I was just young and a kid and, enjoying life as much as I possibly could as a kid.
Yes, of course.
But here all these dynamics are happening among the adults that I'm unaware of.
So let me ask you a question. You mentioned a minute ago that that this couple were caregivers to various different children. When you said other children, was it just their children? I know they were caregivers for you. Were they caregivers besides you to other children?
Yes, there were several of my mother's children that were left with them.
Oh, okay.
And other of my dad's wives' children as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, so those were the other ones. And so in the story, when it moves on in the book, some things develop, some things are actually going on that you were not aware of that's happening with Antonia's husband. Tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was a convert to my dad's church, and in his mind, eventually, he's going to marry several of my father's daughters, because that's what he's been promised by my father, is several of my father's daughters, which is just insane to me as a person now that doesn't believe in or practice polygamy.
Several of your sisters were to marry this man?
Yeah, my dad would promise his daughters by name to different men, not just one singular man, like, okay, one day you'll get to marry this one, and then he would stick to that. No, several men would be promised his daughters.
Wow, I thought it would be like one daughter per man, but not like various sisters. That even takes it a step further.
No, well, what he would do is, like, he would talk to whoever he was with and promise certain things, and then talking to somebody else, he would promise them certain things too. And basically, whatever his revelation was at the time is what would happen when the girls became of marriageable age.
Yes. So, very, very interesting stuff. In the beginning of the book, we end up finding out your relationship with your mother, and there's just so much ground to cover, especially not just in the book, but actually just in your real life. So, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your mother growing up through these years? What was happening?
Well, my mom had 12 children of her own.
Okay.
Plus, she was raising the children of 2 of her sister wives.
Why?
So several additional children. One of them had gone to prison, and one of them died of cancer. So there were 6 additional children that my mom was caring for.
Wow.
So when I was born, I was number 10 of her 12 children. So I was one of the younger children.
Okay.
And we just, when you were the baby, you got to be with your mom. My mom would take the baby with her wherever she went, even when she would travel for my father. And so for a period of time, I got to be the baby that got to travel with my mom. And I remember trips with my mother, just me by myself. But then my younger brother came along and ousted me from that spot. and then a younger sister than him came along and ousted him. So it was, fair play all the way around, except my younger sister never got ousted because she was the last one.
Okay.
So my mom was loving and caring, and she had a capacity to care for and feed multitudes of children just because that's what life required of her.
Yes, most definitely.
And she did that to the best of her ability and with very little means.
And so
we were basically raised in poverty.
Yes. In the opening of the book, what is the reason you are staying with Antonia?
Well, I wasn't explained that as information at the time, but what I learned as a grown adult asking these questions was that my father had a revelation that his children were in danger. So he ordered my mother to take his children to Mexico and leave us there, just to protect us, which was actually the very opposite of what happened. We weren't protected down there.
Completely, yes, completely.
And so that's the reason why I ended up in Mexico, which I didn't understand at the time. So I was a very confused 9-year-old girl wandering around the streets of Mexico selling cake slices. Just trying to make sense of why I'm not with my mother.
Totally. How old are you in the cover of the book?
I am probably 6 or 7 years old in that photograph. I don't know for sure, and I've asked my mom, and she's not sure. She's 86 now, so her memory isn't as tree.
When I read about them cutting your hair and your sleeping conditions and your requirements daily, tell us a little bit of your requirements that you perform as far as your tasks. You weren't going to school? Were you not going to school at 9?
In Mexico, we did not attend school. When we were there, when we were in the U.S., the United States, we were enrolled in public school. But during the time period that I was in Mexico, from the age of 9 to 10, I was not in school at the time. At first, when I first arrived, I was put to work as a housekeeper/helper for the lady that lived downstairs from us.
Yes.
And my wages would be paid to my caregivers, and I never saw a dime of that. So I'm not sure how much work you can get out of a 9-year-old, but I sure did my best. And then when that work ended, I would walk around selling cake slices door to door in Mexico. And, if you see the cover of my book, you can see that I'm just a blonde-haired, fair-skinned, American-looking child.
Yes.
And here I am.
Selling cakes.
We were selling cake slices door to door by myself, wandering around the streets of Mexico in Veracruz, trying to earn some pesos that would help feed the people that were living in that apartment.
You know what's interesting, Anna, is that from all of our listeners from the LeBaron community, do you know how there's going to be so many that at some points have, sold from door to door? We had to become salesmen of something, and that's just going to relate with so many to make ends meet. So
most of the people that have read my book that are from the United States and not from this type of family that I grew up in are just shocked and surprised and horrified about that story. So maybe some of your listeners are going, yeah, so what's the big deal?
Yes.
So if it wasn't cake slices, it was rocks that we would paint with little designs and sell door to door as, quote, paperweights. And then sometimes people would show up from the U.S. with clothes items that had been stolen from the Goodwill boxes.
Wow.
And then I would just take these baskets of clothes door to door, let people try on what fit, and sell the articles of clothing for a peso or two.
Wow. I did not know that you did that.
Yes. So I don't think I wrote about that in the book, but that's also one of my experiences in Mexico. And so juxtaposed against that is the fact that the adults, when they were with us and we would travel from one city to the next down in Mexico or whatever, they would be warning us, kids, not to run off or, dart away from the adult that was, moving them from one city to the next. And they would warn us and threaten us with the fact that, kids that run away or wander off sometimes get abducted and are kidnapped. Like American-looking children get kidnapped in Mexico. They're telling us this. And then sending us out alone, going door to door. And I was just, afraid, knowing that at any time I could be kidnapped.
Completely. And of course, and when you did this, you didn't go with one of your sisters or your brothers along. You'd go alone from door to door.
I was going alone door to door, and it's a good thing that in my now adult life, I always say that I was born with a GPS in my head, because I can get places that are once I've been someplace one time, I can usually find my way back there again, and I have a good idea about where I'm at, logistically speaking, So I learned my way around town pretty quickly, even as a stranger being sent out door to door from the very beginning. At first I had a little trouble finding my way around, but then as I learned the landmarks and, recognized streets and, the buildings and the houses and things, I could go out pretty far and still find my way back home, even without a GPS back in 1977, 78,
Totally. Well, Anna, give me one moment. We are going to just do a promotional break and reintroduce for the new people that are coming in to listen, and we'll get right back.
Okay.
Estás sintonizado a El Chalán Radio Spot.
So thank you for being with us tonight. We are in interview with, we're having a very awesome conversation with Anna LeBaron, talking about her brand new book. I think it's been 3 months. It was released in April, Anna, correct? In March. In March. The title of the book is called The Polygamist Daughter, written by Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson and published by Tyndale. So in the book, and of course in just laying out the story of laying out the foundation of everything that's going on that surrounds you in the opening of your book, can you tell us what's going on with your father?
Well, at the time in the early pages of the book, it's about 1978, and my father has been on the run from the law, from the Mexican police, as well as from the U.S. authorities since 1973. So for about 5 years or so, he's been on the run. And so we were moving around quite a bit to stay ahead of the law. And even though I wasn't aware that he was responsible for the deaths of people, we could sense the fear among the adults as they moved around and came and went in the night, and we would uproot and move suddenly quite a bit. So while the scenes that are happening in Mexico, there was a period of time where my father came to the apartment where I was staying. I'm 9 years old, and that's when I meet him for the very first time.
Wow, yes.
At age 9.
I read that part of the book, and I was just jaw-dropped at the interaction you had with your father and just your relationship, or more relationlessness
right.
with your father. I was just gripping. But tell us a little more. Continue.
So my father was wanted. He was moving around quite a bit to just stay ahead of the law. He would spend a lot of time at a desk writing. The very few times that I was with him, that's what I observed, was him writing quite a bit. And I still have in my possession some of the writings of his that he wrote when he was in prison in the early 80s. Because eventually the Mexican police did catch up with him. I believe it was 1979. So very shortly after the time period when I met him is when he was eventually arrested in Mexico. And I know that he was arrested, put in jail, and then somehow he got out of jail. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that he was probably paying somebody under the table to get out of that jail for that time.
Yes.
And then eventually he was re-arrested for a different crime and taken to the U.S. border, handed over to the FBI, and then taken to Salt Lake City where he was tried, and then convicted and sentenced to life in prison. So this was all happening in the very early chapters of my book.
Okay. So then the story proceeds, and you end up from Antonia. You end up moving around to other various different caregivers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there were two cities very close to each other, Galeria and Catemaco, Veracruz. Probably a 20 to 30 minute bus ride away from each other.
Yes.
And I know that because I took that bus ride several times. It felt like hours-long bus ride, but using Google Maps, today, because we have that technology, I was able to find the two towns and measure the kilometers between them. And it wasn't as long a bus ride as I imagined, remembering it back to my childhood when it felt like it took forever,
Yes, totally.
So there were two apartments rented in Catemaco, and there were two homes side by side rented in Galeria. And several different people resided in each of those four dwellings. And we would get, kind of moved and shuffled back and forth, just depending on what was happening and who was living where and who had to up and leave and go and come. And so the kids were shuffled around quite a bit in that time period. So we never really felt like we were cared for, wanted, or any way, except that the fact that we could bring in income. The fact that I could go door to door selling cakes and rocks and clothes, was really valuable. The fact that I worked hard.
Completely.
When I lived in Catemaco and Galeria, which probably a lot of your listeners will remember, scrubbing clothes on a washboard and then hanging them up to dry on a clothesline with clothespins, So those were experiences that I had down in Mexico. And even though I was 9 years old, here I am scrubbing clothes all day for everyone in the household on a washboard and then hanging them up to dry outside in the yard in Catemaco, or Galeria. In Catemaco, we had to go up a couple flights of stairs to the roof where the little communal clothesline was.
How many in your household? How many were in charge of doing that?
Well, each home housed quite a few people. Anywhere from 6 to 10 people is a guest.
Wow.
And they were just little, 2-bedroom place. We slept on the floor. And each home had so many people living in it. And people came and went regularly in the nighttime. So it didn't matter what you were doing. Like when you went to sleep at night and then you woke up the next morning, the same people were not in the house. Usually people came and people also left in the middle of the night.
And who were these people?
My dad's followers.
Just moving everywhere. I guess there was just like a small network that was going around that extended into Mexico and into the U.S. Correct?
Correct. They had people in in Veracruz, in Mérida, Yucatan, as far as I know, California, Colorado,
and
Texas.
Why were they moving around so much?
Because of the law that was after them. They had to keep moving in order to not get arrested.
Okay, so that's the reason why it's happening in your book, because that's what's happening when you open the book. The law is already after them at this point. Okay, got that.
The law is already after them, for sure.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I don't talk about that in the book is because I tried to share the story from my childlike perspective so that the reader could see what was happening in my mind and behind my eyeballs. Like, what I was seeing and feeling and thinking, that's what the reader knows, not the stuff that the adults know.
Yes, very, very, very well done. And so, can you tell us a little bit about, in the book, what ends up happening later when you meet your father? Can you tell us a little bit about your interaction and your when he invites you to go with him to be a missionary or do some missionary work? What happens?
Oh my gosh, that was such a crazy day. We went. He asked me if I wanted to go, preaching with him. Which, of course, I didn't know what preaching was, and he was going out, proselytizing and wanting to convert, what he called them the Lamanite people, which was the Mexican people.
Yes, yes.
And so I got to go with him that day, and it was raining all day long, and the streets, some of the streets that we were visiting were not paved. So we were driving around on, roads that were dirt roads, and with the rain, it made mud. And I'm wearing little chanclas, flip-flops that were, when we walked, the mud is just being flipped up on the back of my skirt, and I was not aware of this. So this was happening as we were leaving after the whole day of preaching and listening to my father drone on and on and on, because he could go on and on forever.
Wow.
And so we're walking back to the car after a long day of listening to him, which was, for a 9-year-old girl, super boring. Let me just tell you.
And,
so we're walking back to the car.
Yes.
And I'm flipping mud on the back of my skirt with every step I take. And of course, my father gets angry that I'm going to be sitting in his car and I'm going to get his car muddy. And I'm scolded for not paying attention and for getting muddy and dirty. But I'm a 9-year-old kid. How am I supposed to know that flip-flops are going to throw mud on the back of my skirt with every step,
Yes, and then especially when you this is, during the time you're just meeting your father.
Yeah, I mean, these are the 2 times. So the first interaction I had of meeting my father happened very soon before that, and just right in that same frame of time. But those were the only 2 times I remember talking to my dad.
Wow, that's so gripping. Gosh.
I mean, it's sad. It's sad.
It's very, very sad. It's just so many missed opportunities, and there's just so much surrounding that.
Yeah.
In the book, later on, you end up moving from Catemaco and from the region of Mexico. How do you get into the U.S. and what happens?
Well, from Catemaco, I ended up in Mérida, where I got to live with my older sister for a period of time.
Yes, that's correct.
And we were living in a rented house on the beach during the off season because she was also in hiding. So that was like a respite for me, being with a familiar person, a familiar face, and actually feeling loved and cared for and appreciated and wanted.
And celebrated, even with your birthday.
And celebrated with my 10-year-old birthday when she made the pound cake.
Yes.
Because I was, turning 10, We didn't have an oven. So she made 10 pancakes, stacked them on top of each other, poured syrup over them, and then called it a cake.
I didn't know that's why.
Very sweet.
I didn't know that's why it was a pancake cake, because you guys didn't have an oven. That makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. So she did the best she could with what she had, but again, we were very poor and not with a lot of means to be able to do anything more special than that.
And then from there, from Merida, you end up moving to the U.S.?
Yes. So one of my dad's wives comes to Merida and takes me and my younger brother. And we end up in the back of her pickup truck where she has a camper over the top in the middle of the Mexican heat in the summer,
Oh, wow.
in the back of the camper. And it was just stifling hot, and the floor of the truck, the bed of the truck was hard, as you can imagine. And we didn't have like a mattress or pillows, just thin blankets, and there you go for this however many mile trek to the United States from Merida.
Yes, that's a long
Yucatan.
way. That's
a long trip. She had very little money, just enough for gas and, a little bit for here and there. And so along the way home, she would pull over on the side of the road, and where she would see, produce being grown. And we would kind of, go through the fields and pick produce and eat what we could. And that's how we were fed on this trip.
Wow, that's so poor.
I'm telling you, I remember eating watermelon on the side of the road where she just kind of broke it in two with her knee, and then we were like scooping it out with our hands.
Wow.
And then, you're all sticky from the watermelon. You don't have a way to wash your hands. And then you get back into the sweltering hot camper.
What a journey.
It was so bad. I'm laughing because it was just so horrific. Remembering it is just like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Who would believe this,
Yes, especially from what you were taught that you were in the kingdom.
Oh yeah, we were celestial children. Yeah, right. Catch me up now. So we drive all the way to the border. I'm pretty sure it was Brownsville where we crossed. And she doesn't have papers for us because none of my dad's children that were born in Mexico were registered at the consulate and given birth certificates from the United States. None of that was happening. And so we didn't have any papers. So, because she has to get us across the border without any paperwork. She has documents for her own children, but not for us. So she leaves my younger brother and I on a park bench on the Mexican side of the border, drives across with her two children, or however many children she had with her. I don't recall exactly. She drives across with them, leaves them in the truck on the U.S. side.
Yes.
And then walks across pretending to be just a tourist. This was back in the day when you didn't have to have a passport to get in and out of Mexico. So she walks across the border from the U.S. side back to Mexico and finds us. And she had told us before she left us that if we would sit still and not move, that she would buy us ice cream on the U.S. side. So because we were poor and we had nothing and we were eating nothing and we were starving, and I had been sick, like stomach issues, the whole time I was in Mexico. And so I was just this little skinny thing,
Okay.
Barely able to keep body and soul together. And then she goes and promises us ice cream for not moving. My butt was not going anywhere, let me tell you that much. So she gets back and takes my brother and I, and then using the documents that she had for her own children, if needed, she crosses us over back to the U.S. side. So basically, I was in the United States illegally for the rest of my days until I got a passport when I was 21.
Oh, wow. And so this is so the city that you end up moving to is Houston.
We were taken to Houston, and then from there, we were put on an airplane to Denver, which is where my mom was.
Okay. Yeah. Where is it that you end up leaving the cult? You end up leaving the cult in Denver?
No. While we were in Denver, things were happening that were we had horrific living conditions in Denver. We were living in abject poverty, and the children were being used as slave labor.
Can you on that when you're living in Denver? Can you tell us? I thought it was just hilarious when you wrote on your book about what was it what it was to go gardening.
Oh my gosh! Yes. So gardening is a euphemism for a practice that is today called dumpster diving. We would go into the dumpsters behind the grocery stores looking for dairy products that had expired and fruits and vegetables, and hoping for to supplement our nutrition, because that was besides the welfare. My mom was on welfare, but because she could only claim so many children,
yes,
and she was raising so many more,
yes,
the amount of food that she would be given and the food stamps that she would be given was never enough to feed everyone that she was responsible for feeding. So that was one of the practices that she did to help feed everybody and make sure that we didn't starve to death. So that was called gardening. We also did what we called gift boxing, which was backing up to the Goodwill box. I would be put inside the Goodwill box, and I would hand out the bags of clothing that had been donated.
Oh,
and then
that was gripping in your book.
I mean, really, they're telling me. I mean, it never happened where I would be taught and told that while I was in there handing out the bags, if somebody else backed up to donate items, that they were going to leave and just leave me inside the Goodwill box, and that I was just going to stay there and be really quiet and get out of the way so that people donating stuff wouldn't get dumped on my head. And then just be really quiet, and then they would wait for whoever was donating clothes to leave, and then they would come back for me. And that I was to not worry, that they would absolutely come back for me. Now, thankfully, that never happened. I would be in there handing out the things, and I always remembered to leave enough inside the Goodwill box to stack on top of each other so I could climb out.
Yes.
But so it never happened where they had to abandon me while I was inside the Goodwill box, thankfully.
But of course.
But that was like we did that and talked about it in advance just in case it happened.
Yes, and of course, all the time while you were doing this, you were in the fear of that.
Yes, living in fear that it would happen and that somebody would come and they'd have to leave. Oh my gosh. So that was kind of life that we lived in Denver. While we're in Denver, my father is in prison. He's been tried and convicted, and he is not getting out of jail anytime. So, we're on our knees praying every night that somehow miraculously he'll get released.
Let me ask you about this area of the book. When you were in Denver, since people from a cult generally stick together and live around each other. What you don't go into this part of the book, but I was wondering what you guys eventually end up having the electronic store, and where did everybody live, and how many people were like living around you that were associated with your father?
Well, our family did not live in compounds or communes. We didn't have that kind of lifestyle or life. that some polygamist families are used to seeing.
Yes.
Where everyone lives in the same town, and they kind of stick to themselves, and they, that kind of life is not anything that I experienced.
Okay.
We were living in Denver. They had the appliance warehouse where the appliances were repaired and then eventually sold. And so some people lived on the warehouse property with some apartments that were just very old and very run down, right on the property of the warehouse. So some of our family lived there. There was a little white house on the property, a little tiny house. And several, a couple of wives would live there with their children. And then there were homes throughout Denver that would be rented, and people would live in those homes. So we didn't have like the type of lifestyle or the type of lives that are commonly understood or seen in polygamous families. Can I ask you something? Where everyone shares, yeah.
In your book tours that you were doing now, when I read your book, I got the audio version. In your actual book, do you have any pictures does your book have any pictures?
Yes, the actual printed book has photographs in the back.
Okay, and is any of these places on there now?
Well, like the little house that I was born in the colony is pictured and photographed.
Oh, great.
Because I got to take that photograph when I went back to the colony in 2008.
Wow.
And there's a picture of a little house that I lived in. Not a lot of the buildings or homes that I lived in are pictured, except the one I was born in. And then in one, you can see the background of a home that we lived in when I was little. But none of the places that I talk about in the book. However, while I was on my book tour, I did end up going through some of the towns where I used to live.
Yes.
And I stopped, and I would go on Facebook Live and show the pictures. In one of the homes that I lived in Houston, after I ran away, I went and the house was abandoned. So
wow.
I found an entry. The back door was open, and it was going to be demolished. So I went and toured the house right there on Facebook Live.
Wow.
So several times while I've been on a book tour, I've gone on Facebook Live and showed video of the homes where I lived and the places that were part of my childhood. And so that's on my author page on Facebook, where you can go and you'd have to kind of click on the videos on that and just kind of go through the videos and see what's on there. There's also lots of, what I called highway sing-alongs. You can just kind of skip those where I'm just howling at the moon, singing.
Well,
we were driving a long way, so we had some fun along the way.
Very awesome. When I'm going to be posting on the website for the El Chalán radio spot, I have an upcoming website where all these links will be able to be heard without going into the app. And
good.
When I do that, I might change some of these little videos so people can capture a little bit more of the story, which I think is phenomenal.
Okay. Yeah, just get with me after, and I can send you links.
Very nice.
And so that you don't have to go and look for them.
Okay, great.
It would probably be easier for me to find them and send you the link.
Okay. And so tell us how you end up running away, I guess, is the next step that happens sort of in your story.
Yeah. So are we just going to spoil the whole book for your listeners, like entirely?
Well, no, not really. No, we're just going to talk about a few things, and then we're going to talk about some other characters and get into some other crazy stuff.
Okay. I am mostly teasing about that. I know there's not enough time for me to just tell everything. So we left off where I was in Denver, working slave labor, living in really squalor and poverty. Well, my dad was in prison, and I had an older brother that was living and working in Houston. So he, through a series of events, comes and moves our family, my mom and her children and the ones that she's responsible for, to Houston, where he is working in an appliance store,
Okay.
along with several other men that were running this business in Houston. And it was while I was living in Houston. We arrived there when I was about 12 years old, maybe 11. It's a little bit fuzzy. The math is a little bit fuzzy in my head about when we arrived, and not a lot of records were being kept.
Okay.
So we lived there, and it was the best life I had ever known of all my 12 years on this planet.
Yes.
Where we were working, but we were paid for our work. My mom was paid to do her work so she could actually shop for groceries in the grocery store.
Wow.
And we were experiencing life. I had a camera. I could take pictures and use my money that I earned to develop the pictures and buy more film. And then I saved up money and bought myself a brand new pair of Gloria Vanderbilt jeans. I'm 12, 13 years old now, feeling like hot stuff in my brand new jeans.
Even if you were completely underpaid as child labor, correct?
Yes, we were completely underpaid, but it was something.
Yes, completely. It was something from.
It was more than nothing, and in Denver we were getting nothing.
Completely. In Denver is where they have the electronic store, correct? And that was under.
It was the appliances.
Yes, the appliance store. Was under Dan Jordan.
Yes, in Denver, the store was managed by Dan Jordan, and in Houston, it was managed by Mark Shanoff and Dwayne and Ed, and they were kind of all three in business together, managing the warehouse together, but then, each person had a little store out of their home where they would sell the appliances.
Okay. That makes sense. And of course, the whole business on both ends is appliances. Okay, great. Right.
That's what our family knew. That's how we earned our living. That's how everybody provided for themselves. And the way the business was being managed in Houston was probably better than the way it was managed elsewhere.
Yes, completely.
Because we actually were living life better than anything I had experienced, even though it was still hard, even though it was still not normal, and I was still fatherless.
Yes,
and things were happening around me that I didn't understand. It was still the best life I had ever known.
Especially in
my father.
Go ahead.
So my father dies in prison during this period of time, and that kind of upset the apple cart for everyone because he was the leader, and not one singular person was left, quote, as the prophet or in charge. And so there was a lot of insecurity among the adults and a lot of questioning and kind of jockeying for position among the adults about who was going to be the leader and who was in charge and who was in authority. And those were all things that were discussed quite a bit by the adults.
In your book,
as a child, I was just overhearing things and being confused by what's happening.
In your book, you mentioned that Dan Jordan was the right hand of your father. Why was he not left as a leader?
Well, he was, but the thing that happened that changed everything was my father, when he was alive in prison, wanted everyone to come to the prison, guns a-blazing.
Wow.
And bust him out of jail. And nobody would do it because everyone on the outside knew that was a suicide mission.
Wow.
And so it didn't happen. And so my father considered that a
mission.
Rebellion, and he considered it to be he was a betrayed.
Wow.
So while he was in prison, he left a big document, 400 pages is what I understand, called the Book of the New Covenant. in that document, he lists the people that had betrayed him. And my father would order hits on the people that betrayed him.
And this list was a long list? This list was a long list?
Yeah, it was a long list of people.
Wow.
And so Dan Jordan was at the top of that list.
Wow, I can't believe this. No, this is so...
It is crazy. And so that's why Dan Jordan wasn't the one clear in, left in line of succession. Because he's the one who betrayed my father.
Wow.
So that's why he wasn't. But he wanted to be. And he convinced several people that he was, eventually. And my mom was one of them. So down in Denver convinces my mom in Houston that she needs to move herself and her family and children back to Denver.
Yes.
And that's when I got wind that my mom was planning to move back to Denver. And I'm 13 years old at the time. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't want to go back to Denver. Like, this life we have where I can wear Gloria Vanderbilt jeans and go to school and eat Doritos and Oreo cookies in my lunch,
Yes.
The most normal I had ever experienced. And I didn't know that people were dead, people were dying. I didn't know that these things were happening among the adults.
Wow.
That's one of the reasons why the book cover with the censor bars on my eyes and the censor bar on my mouth looks the way it does. It's because there were things that I wasn't aware of, things that I wasn't allowed to see.
And you were completely intimidated to not speak out for sure.
Oh, 100%. We were trained and coached and taught to lie and not tell outsiders about our family and who our dad was and who the other people were. And so we were taught not to say anything.
Wow.
So my mom is planning to move back to Denver, and I'm thinking, no. I don't want to live in Denver again. Life there was horrible.
Yes.
And so that's when I decided to run away from home.
Yes, totally. And then and this is where Mark and Lillian come into the picture.
Correct.
Let me. It
was my sister Lillian that I called when I decided to run away.
And Lillian is your full sister, half sister?
She's my half sister.
Okay, great. Okay, well, let me take a quick break, and we'll come right back to the chat.
Sounds good.
You are locked in to El Chalán Radio Spot.
So tonight we have Anna LeBaron joining us here in conversation and just a review over her awesome and amazing book, The Polygamist Daughter, with this journey that is just so gripping. The book is written by Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson and is published by Tyndale. Anna, I wanted to ask you a few questions just pertaining to your journey as an author. If we can just do that, let me see here. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I have known for a long time that I wanted to tell my story. I have read other memoirs from other people who have experienced, life that was very different from the ordinary American life. And I knew that I had a story to tell. However, I grew up with so much shame about my family that it was difficult to overcome that piece in order to be able to write my story. However, I started speaking publicly in 2007, sharing my story. And everywhere I would go and tell people what had happened to me and the way I was raised and how things were, people there was never enough time to tell the whole thing, and people would always ask, do you have a book? And so for a lot of years, I've known that a lot of people would have paid money to buy a book had I had one. So for 10 years, I told my story and, would go and be, speak at different events where people would have paid money for my book if I had one. So I did decide to write this book once I had been through enough counseling, professional counseling, and enough healing to be able to tell my story without being re-traumatized in the telling of it.
Yes, most definitely. How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I had it in my head for a lot of years, but when I physically put my fingers to a laptop and started writing, that was January of 2014. And in March or April, I'm not sure exactly when, of 2014, so 3 or 4 months, I had about 40,000 words in a document.
Wow, that's pretty amazing and quick.
I mean, for the longest time, I didn't even know how to start. And then I attended a writers' conference in January 2014 that kind of unleashed me and unleashed this whole dam of words that had been stored up inside of me. And then once I started writing, it was hard to stop. And so that was the beginning of it. But the book didn't actually get finished completely with all the edits and everything that the publisher wanted until January of 2017.
Okay.
So the process took 3 years total.
Very awesome. Was there a particular purpose that you wanted to accomplish with this project of your book?
Absolutely, yes. When I talk about my family, when I talk about my healing journey, the things that have happened to me, my hope is that the reader will take away with them a sense of hope if they can identify with any of the themes of the book. And you don't have to have been born into a polygamist family to identify with the trauma and the abuses that we endured as children, even the traumas that I experienced as an adult. Because just because I ran away at 13 didn't mean the killing stopped. They didn't. And so trauma and abuse is common to people.
Yes.
So anyone that reads this, I'm hoping that they take away with them courage and hope that their healing journey and their healing path will be opened up to them, and they can take a few more steps down that road, just based on knowing the things that happened to me and where I was, where I am now, and how that can offer them courage and hope for their own journey.
Very, very amazing. In the process of this journey of writing your book, was there something that you learned? What did you derive?
In the process of writing, I learned that it's okay for me to have my perspective on what happened to me as a child, as a teenager, and even as an adult. That everyone has a perspective on life as it unfolds. And even people in the same home can experience similar events, or even the exact same events, and draw from those events different perspectives looking back. And that I can have my perspective, and it can be real, and it can be valid, and that other people also have their own perspectives on the events that unfolded. And that all of our stories matter. My story matters, but every one of my 49 plus siblings, they also have stories, and their stories matter too.
Very, 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 very amazing. To our listeners, I want to invite you guys to send your questions either on the Mixler app. You can send your questions, or on any of the chats that are open. Please send your questions. If you have something you would like to ask Anna, I would definitely make my way to get to your question. On my next question, Anna, what was the hardest part of the book to write?
I would say the hardest part, which you didn't probably read because you listened to the audio, the Q&A at the end of the book,
okay,
that is in the printed version. I probably cried more writing that than anything else.
Wow, I can't
because
believe
the book.
I can't believe I missed out.
Because oh my gosh, it tore my heart into shreds, writing the answers to the questions. And the reason why the Q&A is there is because there was so much content in the book that my book actually ended up being longer than what the publisher would have recommended for a memoir. Wow. And so there was a lot of my life, especially more towards my adult life, that didn't get covered in depth in the writing of the book.
Yes, I saw you just run through.
So the publisher understood and knew the need of the reader to know more about those parts of my life that just kind of got just very lightly brushed over as far as in the storytelling. And so they sent me an email with all these questions, and they told me, if there's any of these questions that you just do not want to answer, you don't have to.
Okay.
And I just wanted to be as forthright with my readers as possible.
Wow.
So I answered all the questions and probably cried more tears answering those questions than just about any other part of the book.
Wow.
Because it was very difficult and the questions were hard questions.
Wow.
They didn't gloss over the hard events and the things that I was facing.
That is very amazing. I have to get my hands on that. In the process of writing this book, what was your fear of writing this book?
Oh, I had two great fears in writing the book, and one of them was my mom reading the story and and being brokenhearted.
Yes.
About the things that had happened to me, because most children go through stuff. I'm not the only kid who's gone through hard things in life. Almost every kid experiences stuff that is just difficult, and they just kind of carry it inside of them. And kids are taught, even the silent rule is don't talk about the things that happen to you, especially the really, really, really bad things. And it's an unwritten rule and an unspoken rule that you don't say these things.
Yeah,
so my mom was very unaware of most of the events that transpired in this book. And I knew it would break her heart. Even though my mom still believes in polygamy and still lives in a community that practices polygamy, I knew it would break her heart. And I was not setting out to write this book for the purpose of breaking my mother's heart. So in my mind, I had thought for a long time, I'll just wait till my mom passes before I publish the book or before I write the book, because then I don't have to deal with that. Well, that's not what happened. My mom is still alive. And so I talk about the experience of, my relationship with her, and as the writing of the book unfolded and the publishing of it. And I talk about that in the epilogue of the book. And so that was one fear with my mother. And the other one was my 49 plus siblings.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what are they going to think? And my reasoning was sound as far as why I was a little bit scared of, what they would think. And that's because I got out when I was 13. And so many of the others didn't. And so so many of my siblings have suffered so much worse than anything I write about in that book.
Wow.
And so there was a part of me that for a while I thought, who do I think I am writing a book when I didn't suffer as much as the next guy? And so that was something that I had to overcome, and I was able to. I heard a man talking about the David and Goliath story in the Bible, and he was talking about David and how he was sent by his father to the battlefield. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but David is sent to the battlefield to check on his brothers. And when he gets there, Goliath is threatening the children of Israel and, mocking them. And David kind of like, just kind of going, what is his problem, and why isn't anybody challenging him, and
yes,
what's going on here? And his brothers are like, who do you think you are? And go back to the sheep, and go back to tending your sheep. Who do you think you are?
You're nothing against this giant. Yes.
Right. So the man that was talking about the story said, what if David had listened to those criticisms and just tucked tail and turned away and went back to the sheep? What would the outcome have been? And I knew in that moment that was like a message for me, that I didn't need to worry about potential criticisms from my siblings, that I needed to do the thing that I needed to do, and then worry about the rest later. Even though at that point none of my siblings had criticized anything, and for the most part, none of my fears came true. Most of my siblings have been so supportive of me telling my story and sharing my story.
Very, very, very
and so my fears were unfounded, but I did have those fears for the longest time while I was contemplating the writing of the book. But I'm glad I was able to overcome them and eventually prove those fears false.
Well, in the book, you are a warrior, and it's so amazing that you took the time to write that, not just for us to see the warrior in you, but to fill in so many gaps and to see you survive this and especially with such an amazing, just your values and everything you project in the book is so wonderful of who you are as a person. Anna is very, very, very spectacular.
Well, thank you so much.
Say that. What were you going to say?
Ask the question again. No, I was just.
In the next question, I would like to ask. I would like to ask a few more more personal questions that are maybe just related more towards just our backgrounds and everything that surrounds us.
Sure.
Did you live in Colonial LeBaron at some point?
Yes, I was actually born in the LeBaron colony in December of 1968. So I was one of the last of Orville LeBaron's children. I don't know how many more, but not very many were born there in the LeBaron colony. I left when I was 9 months old, so I don't know if you can actually call that having lived in the LeBaron colony. Just a short, brief 9 months, as a nursing baby, But I was born there and stayed for 9 months.
Have you visited the colony since?
One time, I went to the colony in 2008 and attended the Feria de la Amistad.
Okay, great.
And that's where I was able to take the picture that is in the book that shows the house that I was born in. My family, we called it the Rock House because it was made of rocks. And we have pictures of it, how it looked when my mom lived there. Nowadays, it looks different.
Okay.
Because I guess it's been plastered over and looks, doesn't look like a rock house anymore.
Do you know who lived there when you were there? What house it is?
When I went there in 2008, I don't believe that anybody was living there.
Okay.
But the picture is in the book, so if anybody wants to go look at that and figure out, I understand that there is somebody living there now.
Okay. So my next question is this. With all that happened with your father and the splitting of the Herbalites and the Joelites,
yes.
how did this affect your relationship with your place, with your town of birth?
Well, I knew about Chalán LeBaron growing up, but I always knew that we were not welcome there, and that as Herbalites, we were not invited or welcome to show our faces in that town. We always knew that we were the outcasts and that we were, quote, the bad guys. And my father was the bad guy. He was the person that was actually killing people. I mean, he had his own brother killed.
Yes.
Which is horrifying.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that people would not want to have anything to do with Herbal and his followers because of that. And so, I've known all along, and I've always had a curiosity about it, what it looked like and who lived there, and just because I knew that was part of my, history and part of our family history. And so it was surreal for me to go back and visit in 2008 when I went there for the very first time since I was 9 months old. So it had been several decades.
Can I ask another question? On that issue, was there ever like a group that broke off and said, "Listen, we do not espouse our father's beliefs any longer, and we are not Herbalites any longer"? Was there any group that ever broke off that probably would have not suffered under the same judgment as your father?
I know that there were a few people, like my oldest sister, Sylvia says, I know she lives there in the colony.
Your oldest sister?
And she is welcome there. My oldest sister of my dad's children.
Okay.
She lived there in the colony. And, she never followed my father. And there were some people who didn't. And just so that everybody knows, there's nobody alive today that is still following anything that Herbal said or preached or taught. Nobody believes that he was a prophet of any kind. Nobody. Not even the people that still believe in the practice of polygamy and carry that on. Okay. Not even them. Okay. They even know that my father was a criminal man doing criminal things and unspeakable crimes against people that I'm sure some of your listeners loved and cared about, and people that I loved and cared about. But there's nobody alive today. Wow. Even the ones that are currently in prison for having carried out some of my father's orders. Not even them. Every single one of the people that I'm aware of that are in prison have all agreed that what they did was wrong.
Wow, that's such a that's so good to hear, and glad that at some point it all ended.
Yeah, it ended in 1988.
Okay.
When the horrific events that occurred in Texas in 1988 became known as the 4 o'clock murders.
That's when it all ended? Wow, I did not know. That's good to know.
And so there were other things that happened after that, but that was the event that eventually became the reason that the whole thing dissipated and stopped being anything that anyone else practiced or believed in.
Okay. Of course, after the death of the prophet Joel, there's so many that of course live on and carry his beliefs very strongly, even of course currently.
Right.
In your journey in your life, what was the hardest part? What was the hardest thing to deal with in your journey, Anna?
I would say that the most difficult thing that I encountered was learning to live without fear. We were raised in a spirit of fear, and the adults all afraid. The fear was palpable. And
wow.
It was in January of 2014 when I began writing the book that I was talking to my professional counselor when I asked her a question that caused her to give me some information about myself that very much surprised me. I was asking her an insurance question of all things.
Okay.
And she tells me, she says these words, well, with your diagnosis, there is no limit on the number of visits that you can have per year. Because that's the insurance question I was asking her.
Okay.
Was what's the limit? And I said, oh my gosh, do I even want to know what my diagnosis is? And this is what she said. You have anxiety, or you experience anxiety that's triggered by post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
And anxiety is basically fear at its core.
Yes.
And so until January of 2014, I didn't even have a name for the thing that had basically run my life.
Completely,
Fear was running my life. Living in fear of the future and fear of not having enough and fear of you name it. And that's the reason why I opened the book with as a child at 7 years old, because in my counseling I was able to uncover the fact that it was at 7 years old when I started exhibiting signs that I was living with some insecurities that were a driving force behind some of my behaviors.
Wow.
And so this was a long time to live with something and not even know what it's called, and not even know how to manage it, to make it go away, to be healed from it. And so that's the number one thing I would say.
Okay, that actually takes us right into a question that has come in. Melissa would like to know if, she says, do you feel that sharing your story has helped you heal?
Yes, I would say that because I have been through professional counseling, I started my healing journey in 1995. So it's been decades long where I have purposely pursued healing and wholeness and have experienced that. And writing my book is probably what I would call the culmination of my healing journey.
Okay.
Where I am not being re-traumatized in the telling of my story because I have healed. And so being able to talk about it without having all these triggers happening
yes,
is proof that the healing journey has reached a culmination.
That's very, very wonderful. We have another question that comes in, Anna, from Ronnie Stubbs. He wants me to ask if you ever lived in Baja California.
I did live in Baja California. As a matter of fact, that's where I got my first taste of street tacos. That has stayed with me to this day, and I love street tacos, and I order street tacos everywhere I go when I have a choice. So yes, we lived in Baja California, and all over there. Now I was very young, so I don't have memories of where and which house, and but I have very vague recollections of memories that I can talk about with my older siblings. Like, because I was number 10 of the 12 kids, so my older siblings have very vivid memories of living in Baja and experiencing life there. But I do recall that first ever street taco I ever had.
Very awesome.
And so I take that memory with me, and Taco Tuesday is a real thing,
So that's where that was born.
I don't know if Taco Tuesday was born there, but man, I believe in it.
So my next question is, what number of child are you in your father's from all the children your father had?
I don't know the answer to that, and I was polling my siblings, trying to figure out where I am, and I know for a fact that I wasn't one of the youngest ones, as I originally thought. I'm probably smack dab in the middle. So I would love to figure that out, but that would involve probably talking to many of my siblings and getting birth dates from them and birth order correct, and then counting everyone to see who's older and who's younger. So that would entail quite a bit of information gathering to be able to know that.
How many wives did your father have, and do you know how many children he had?
My father had 13 wives, and I've been able to count 50 children. There is another child that I'm aware of from one of the wives that was stillborn. So that's 51.
Okay.
My father also had stepchildren that were brought into the family from previous marriages. And so I count those children as my siblings as well.
Okay, yes.
And so there's 50, I say 50 plus.
Okay.
Just because it depends on who's counting.
And your mother, Anna Mae, she was a fourth wife, correct?
That is correct.
In the book, you end up explaining a little bit about the structure. This was foreign to me, even though I also come from a similar background as you do. The structure of how the oldest, the first wife, her children cannot be told anything or cannot be governed by the newer wives. How does that? How did you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, just from what I observed and the hierarchies that are a natural part of just about every home and environment that you go into, even in a home that has just two parents and several kids, there's a hierarchy among the children. You go to a classroom and there's a hierarchy among the students that are age mates.
Yes.
So hierarchies are a natural form, of people organizing themselves. And that is natural and happens among sister wives that I've observed. I've never been a sister wife, so I can only speak from observation and from having spoken to people that I know that have lived that life. And so there's a natural hierarchy that happens among sister wives and among the children of those sister wives. And so there's a pecking order, and there's the people at the top, and then there's the people at the bottom. And people just naturally organize themselves that way.
Okay.
In any situation you find yourself in any group.
Okay.
So in our family, we knew who the first wife was and how they organized themselves. And my mother was one of the wives that had, she was more outspoken and, could tell people what to do, and they would actually do it. And, you kind of observed that as a kid. And my dad's first wife didn't have usually it's the first wife that is has the most power.
Yes.
In the polygamist families. and usually the youngest or the last wife is, quote, the favorite,
Yeah,
So
totally.
there are some exceptions to those rules, but generally speaking, that's been my observation.
Yeah, same for me. My next question is a kind of a bigger question, and we all would love to know what you think about this in your own opinion. What is your opinion about polygamy?
Well, my opinion about polygamy is that it's not a natural relationship. Most women do not naturally share their husband with another romantic interest. In our society, polygamy is becoming more and more acceptable among consenting adults. Like, there's nobody that unless you're in one of the communities that practices child bride marriages, there's nobody really is a part of the national conversation about polygamy. There's really nobody that's going to agree that child brides is a thing that anybody should be doing or practicing. But as a general rule, among consenting adults, polygamy is gaining popularity and acceptance. But I would like to just submit that in order to be a consenting adult, you have to have a choice and a voice. And in the polygamist group community that I grew up in, and most of the polygamist communities that I'm aware of, girls are raised and groomed to become sister wives and to enter into polygamous relationship. And so if that's the only thing you've ever known and the only thing you've ever seen, and you've been groomed to become that, even if you are 18 and an adult, is it really called consent if it's the only thing you know?
Right.
That's what I would like to submit for consideration by your audience.
Okay, great.
And so people, outside of that, if you've never seen or heard of polygamy and you're interested and you're grown and you're mature and you have your own thoughts and you have a voice and you have a choice, and that's what you want to do, knock yourself out. Go for it.
Which leads me to my next question. Have you ever experienced a positive example of a polygamous life?
I haven't known anybody that has lived it that has a lot of positive things to say about it.
Okay. My next question is, what are your feelings? What were your feelings when you were growing up about LeBaron?
About the LeBaron colony?
Yes, about LeBaron and just your father's background, and I know they held similar beliefs, and of course with all the division. What were your feelings just growing up about the colony?
Well, I didn't know a lot about it. I just knew the things that people would talk about and the fact that I was born there. So the fact that I was born there kind of gave me a little bit of an emotional tie, an emotional connection with the town of the LeBaron colony.
Most definitely.
Just because I was born there, it's my place of birth. And there's a sense of pride that I have about having been born there, where generations of my family have lived and have their history and their roots right there in that town. So I have a sense of pride about that. And
how do you feel about LeBaron now? Is that the same expression?
I still talk about having been born there with a sense of pride and connection to the roots of my family, and knowing that so much of my family lives there. Now, because of the way we were raised and because of the things that my father did that ostracized us from that community and from these other family members, just in the publication of the book, I have been able to make some connections with family that had never been made before. I am meeting family members and connecting with them on the different social media. I mean, just talking to you
Yes.
is an example of people that have lived there and have their roots there as well as me, where we're making these connections that are real and powerful connections.
Yes, most definitely, especially
Where you're hearing my story, I'm hearing your story, and we're finding our humanity in one another.
yes, most definitely.
And finding out that, things aren't what we thought they were. Things aren't that way anymore.
Yes, and
for me, that is a huge, huge step in the right direction.
Yes, most definitely. I think it's one of the most beautiful things that's actually taken place with the writing of your book. In our chats, we shared the video, the conversation of how you met Ruth Warner, the other author of another book for and it was just phenomenal to us. Just the connections.
That is one of my favorite stories.
Would you like to talk about it a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. I did not know Ruth Warner, and I didn't know who she was, and didn't know anything about her. When I saw a tweet in October of 2015, I saw a tweet about her book, that it was coming out in January, and I did not know that she was my cousin at the time.
Wow, yes.
I tweeted her. Like, if you can imagine the billions and billions of tweets every day, and I tweeted her that because her publicist had posted, I was following her publicist on Twitter, and her publicist had posted this tweet about her book. Yes. And it didn't tell me that we were related or anything about the book. And I had tweeted the author because I love reading memoir.
Yes.
And I knew it was a memoir. So Ruth is reading this tweet from Anna LeBaron, and she's not assuming that I'm Ervil's daughter. She's just assuming, there's lots of LeBarons out there, because there are. Yes. And so she decides to figure out who I am. And so she goes on Facebook and finds me, and can you imagine this? Her father is Joel.
Yes, yes.
And he had, I believe, 42 children, if I remember correctly. And my father is Ervil with his 50-some-odd children. So almost 100 children between these two men. And Ruth and I do not have any mutual friends that are cousins.
Yes, yes.
Our only mutual friend was Irene Spencer.
Wow.
So she contacts Irene Spencer and asks her about me and, who I am and stuff before she replies to my tweet. And once she gets the kind of the green light from Irene, and Irene vouches for me as a human being that's kind and caring,
Yes, yes.
Ruth finally replies to my tweet, and by that time I had figured out who she was.
Oh, wow.
Through a series of online information. I found out who she was, and I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what have I done? I have tweeted one of Joel's children publicly, and I knew the unspoken rule that the Ervilites were not allowed to talk to or interact with or have anything to do with the Joelites. And that rule had been in place for 4 decades or 3 decades or however long it had been. I think 4 decades.
For too long, for much too long.
For much too long. And I knew that I had violated that unspoken rule without knowing it. And so I just sat there just sweating bullets emotionally, thinking, what is she going to do or say? So I had private messaged her and said, Ruth, when I tweeted you, I did not know that we were related. I am Ervil's daughter, and and I escaped the cult when I was 13. I've made a life for myself that I'm proud of. And I will delete those tweets if they're causing you any kind of pain or suffering.
Yes.
You know, because I didn't know.
Yes.
And so, but I also knew that just deleting them, if she'd already seen them, would make the situation even more awkward.
Yes, more awkward.
And that was the last thing I wanted. So I waited for her to respond, and it took her a few days. And then when we made the connection and we started talking and dialoguing, I was so relieved when she was so gracious about how awkward our meeting was on Twitter, you know? And she was kind and gracious, and she offered to send me a copy of her book, an advanced copy of her book, which I accepted and read it. And then when we had set up a time to visit by phone, which would have been the first time, you know. And so her book arrived the day before our scheduled call. And I got off work that night at 9 o'clock. I read until about 2 o'clock in the morning when I just couldn't keep my eyeballs open even one more second.
Oh, wow.
I woke up at 5 after a 3-hour nap in the middle of the night, you know. I woke up at 5, put on a pot of coffee, and kept reading. And at 10 o'clock, at 9:59, I finished the book. I mean, I was reading it in, like, hoping I could finish it before she called so that I would know her story.
Yes.
So at 10 o'clock, the phone rings. I had finished the book the minute before. And then we sat on the phone and talked for a couple of hours. And I'm so, so grateful that she was willing to explore having any kind of a relationship with me.
Yes, well,
and it was so it was such a powerful connection and a conversation that we had. I'm getting emotional just talking about it because it meant so much to me after being ostracized from that community for so long and feeling like we were just second-class citizens because we were Ervil's children.
And yet she's your cousin, and she feels the same way of such an amazing connection that you guys have come to have. Even your guys' journey at, you know, breaking off in your teens to leave such movements.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So much in common.
So what had happened up until then in my life is that I had been learning how to promote books on social media because I knew I was writing a book.
Yes.
And I didn't have a contract yet with a publisher, but I was writing my book.
Yes.
And my agent was out there pitching my book. And so I had been learning about, you know, social media and social media engagement and interaction and how to promote a book on social media. So when I was talking to Ruth on the phone, I asked her if she had a launch team, which is how books are now being promoted on social media when they're coming out. So I asked her if she had a launch team because I had been on a launch team before for different books.
Okay.
And she says to me, "What's a launch team?" So, because I was going to offer to just be on her launch team to help her promote her book on social media.
Yes.
And she didn't have one. And so I put together just this ragtag team of people, like in a big, big hurry. I had 250 people in this Facebook group that I started, and all of them willing to help promote her book on social media.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so I put together this team of people and then worked tirelessly the entire months of November and December because for 2 months, even all through the holidays, this team was so incredible and so passionate about Ruth's book. And it came out January 5th of 2016. And it became an instant New York Times bestseller.
Wow, yes, it's very, very awesome.
Because of this team doing their part. This team, and it was so, it was such an amazing experience for me. I felt like I was doing reparations while I was leading this team on Ruth's behalf.
Wow. That's that's an incredible story. That's very wonderful to know. Goodness. So let me ask you this. On some of our other questions, eventually I would like to get a little bit into some of your activism and just some of where your life has gone and just your where you are nowadays. Before I do that, I just want to ask you this. From our extended audience that's listening tonight is the LeBaron community. And do you have anything that you would like to say to the LeBaron community, your extended relatives tonight?
I would love to get to know them. It's been a missing part of my life for way too long. But I also understand that every one of us has a different journey that we're on in our life, and that not everyone is going to want to make this connection with any of the children of Ervil LeBaron, the man that caused so much devastation to an entire community.
Yes.
And so while I would hope and long for a connection with others, I understand that the pain of what my father did is still there. And so it's almost too much to hope for. But at the same time, I know that so many and so much healing has happened and so much has changed in all of our lives in the past 4 decades.
Yes.
That have made it possible for you and I to even have this conversation.
Yes.
For Ruth and I to have the conversations that we've had. And so for the people that are willing and the people that are open to it, I'm very open and hopeful that connections can be made and then stories can be told and more healing can happen. That's my hope for everyone, for all of us, is for healing and wholeness to increase in all of our lives.
That's very, very, very wonderful. And of course, that also leads us into a little bit of your activism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I live here in Dallas, Texas now. I have 5 grown children, and, I am very passionate about books in the way that they shape people's lives, and the books that have shaped my life, and the books that are yet to be written. There are so many stories that need to be told, and I'm currently, the way I earn my living now is helping other people get the word out on social media about their books. So this thing that I started with Ruth and then have continued is now the way I earn my living. And so I am very passionate about books and social media and book promotion because books change people's lives. Yes. They change people's perspectives. They change their beliefs, their thoughts, their actions, and the messages that people carry within them that actually get them written out on paper have so much power to do good in the world. And that's why I'm passionate about this subject, passionate about book launching, getting the messages out that people have carried inside of them that the world needs.
Which I'll tell you this personally, Anna. The Anna I met in the book and the Anna I speak to tonight are such amazingly well connected, and it's just that you've ended up in this place where you want to help others heal and others bring out their story and be able to, create the bridges. Is the amazing Anna we met in that book. Wow. Very, very incredible, Anna.
Well, it's nice to know you and to know that is also the way you feel, that bridges need to be built and that connections can be made. And the amazing thing about social media is that it allows people to make connections that otherwise couldn't be made just because of distance or, whatever. But social media has been very powerful in my family, with just my siblings, the connections that we've been able to make. And so I'm hoping that that will continue to spread out and that those connections can continue.
Yes, definitely. There's always going to be there's just so many new and younger generations that are willing and do not carry the pain of what happened in the past that's been so long ago, that that are so open to the dialogue and to completely leave what happened with your father in the past.
That's my hope and my prayer for everyone, is that can be the case. Just because it is no longer anything that anybody believes in anymore.
Totally. Let me see if I have any other questions. Does anybody want to get a last minute question in before we say goodbye to Anna? I think Anna, when I read your book, I have read Ruthie's book when it came out, and I'm even in her book. I'm one of her characters. And
oh wow!
Yeah, I'm Alex in the book. I come out maybe 5 times. I'm one of the twins. Yeah. And when I read her book, it was, Ruthie does such a wonderful job in writing her book that when you start reading it, it's very beautiful how she captures everything, that you immediately relate to her, and you relate to what just her story, her perspective, how she feels, how she thinks, and how she thinks that, how she expresses herself is like, that's so me. She's so me. She's so me in the book,
Mm-hmm.
And when I read your book, when I picked up your book, I wasn't sure if if the same thing was gonna happen, and it did.
Wow.
The Anna we meet in your book is just so pure, of just conscious, and just so such a fighter, and so there's just so many qualities, Anna, that are just so spectacular in the Anna we meet in the book, that is just represents so much of that side of so many of us, of what we want to be and what we care to be and what we fight to be. And we see that in your book and in you. And that was the most important part. Go ahead.
I will say that when you are raised in the kind of circumstances that most everybody that's probably listening that lives, that's your audience, your regular audience, I would say that growing up the way we did and living the way we did created people of character.
Yes, I was thinking about
when you have to work hard and do the things that are required of you in the kind of communities that we lived in, it makes or breaks you. Completely. And for most of us, it has made us into people who are strong of character, strong of mind, strong of will, and passionate about life, passionate about the things that we're excited about.
I'm so glad you got to say that. That's awesome.
I mean, it's the truth.
Yes,
it's the truth.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, you think that's what it is, how we were raised, and the pain that, just our values and the hardship that it really ends up shaping us to become such warm-hearted and just a much more pure soul, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, kind-hearted people that work hard, that provide, that look out for their family, that have their backs. Yes. Just these are the kinds of people that are my family, and I'm super proud of my family.
Another question I want to ask you really quick, Anna. Who are you? Who is your closest contacts of within your circle, within your social circle that are still connected to LeBaron? Who are the ones that are more connected in LeBaron from your social circle?
Well, I know that my oldest sister, Sylvia, lives in LeBaron, and Craig and Jeremy Bateman I've made a connection with. I got to meet them for the first time when I went to the LeBaron colony in 2008. And so, I've been connected to them, through that. And then Ruthie, of course, is another contact. And now you.
Yes.
And there's others now that I'm slowly connecting with on social media that I'm probably less familiar with, just because we haven't had long phone conversations like this one. So a lot of people have read my book and connected with me, but I haven't heard their stories. And stories are so powerful, and they have a way of connecting people. And so if anybody reads my book and wants to connect with me, they are welcome to message me, to connect with me on social media. And, hearing other people tell their story and knowing the ways that our stories would intersect is so important.
Yes.
And I'm very open to that.
Which is why this conversation tonight was so spectacular, just such a bridge-building conversation.
That's what I hope.
I have one quick question from Escarline. She says, "What is the best book What is the best book she read? What is the best book you've read, Anna?"
Well, I have a lot of personal favorites. I would say the one that has helped me tell my story in the way that I did, with vulnerability and without shame, is Brene Brown's book called Daring Greatly. It shaped the way I decided to tell my story.
Really?
And it helped me overcome the shame of being Ervil's daughter, and it helped me to make the choice to be vulnerable. The name of the book is Daring Greatly, and it's based on that Man in the Arena that Theodore Roosevelt made popular. And so I would encourage people to check out that writing called Man in the Arena, where she talks about how once you are actually living your life and you're putting yourself out there, that it's like being put in the arena to fight. And to when you share your story and you're open, that you're in the arena and everybody's observing and watching,
Yes.
And the way she talks, she's a researcher and a storyteller, and she researches vulnerability and shame. And those were two very powerful things that affected the way I wrote my book, the way I wrote my story. And I would highly recommend that book to anyone.
Very, very awesome. Well, Anna, I want to conclude just our conversation. I want to thank you so much for taking this time to come and share with us just about your book, and just share with us the spectacular Anna that we meet in your book. Thank you for doing this and taking this time. It means so much to me personally, and I'm sure so many already have enjoyed the conversation, and even after the conversation, when it's reposted, I'm sure many will come and listen. There's just so much. I'm glad that the conversation was there was so much meat on the bone for the conversation, and there was just so much good stuff talked about, and still there's so much information that we didn't talk about.
I know. We could have another conversation like this.
I know. We never even talked about you being on your father's hit list, and so many powerful moments from your book. It was just so crazy.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to even just have the hope of making more connections with my family in the colony. I feel humbled and I feel emotional about this, and I'm just grateful for you for making this opportunity for me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on my show and connecting with us like the Anna we know in your book, and you haven't faded, and that's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, anyways, everybody, tonight, thank you so much for being with us. We just finished discussing The Polygamist Daughter, the book from Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson, a memoir. Published by Tyndale. Please get your copy and get the whole story. The book completely fills in so much background that was not known, even for Anna's family and her mother. Her mother didn't even have a clue of so many of the events that Anna experienced. Everything is in the book. The book is incredible. She is captivating. She is powerful. She's a fighter. There's so much to relate with Anna in this book, and I just thank you for being with us tonight, and we'll catch you here next week. Not next week, but in 2 weeks. And this is Richie on El Chalán Radio Spot. Thank you, and have a great night. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
El Chalán Radio Spot is a program geared to kick off the weekend in a TGI Friday style. Written and hosted and produced by Richie Stubbs. Hosted among Mexico, US, and Canada, a multilingual radio program. El Chalán is geared to the wonderful LeBaron community, and all are welcome. Thank you for being a part of tonight's show. Until then, thank you.